Okay, so our next stop on the road to understanding economic geography is to look at development and what development is. Broadly defined, we can say that development is this. This is the living conditions, the ability to accumulate wealth, and the accessibility to life-sustaining and prolonging goods, services, and technology. Now look, development is ongoing and it never stops. I'm sure the Romans 2,000 years ago thought they were living in the most developed place that would ever exist. But if any of us were projected back 2,000 years, we wouldn't last a day there. So how are future generations, hundreds, thousands of years in the future, going to look at us? So many of the previously examined characteristics that we've looked at, especially the things related to population, like total fertility rate, infant mortality rate, life expectancy, natural increase rate, the demographic transition, a lot of these things, when you put them together, they begin to add up to the level of development that a country enjoys or that they do not enjoy. So, to be truthful to you, there has been an evolution of the terminology related to countries or areas or societies and their levels of development, especially within academia and international bodies, like, for example, the United Nations. Today, we generally refer to countries as either being developed, as in more developed countries, or developing, as in less developed countries. Developed usually means the richer countries, and developing usually means the poorer countries on Earth. In the past, and I don't mean the distant past, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, the terms developed and developing, along with undeveloped countries, these terms were commonly used. Now, undeveloped carries a sort of stigma to it, which is one of the reasons I think it's been cast aside. In addition to that, you probably heard the terms first world and third world and maybe second world as well. A second world country, we still use that term. It's a communist country, a country that has a command economy, and I'll talk about that later in the semester. Third world, this was generally associated with undeveloped countries, and it has also some stigma attached to it, but you still hear people use that term, tercero mundo, people say that sometimes. First world, people use this term, but mostly it's used in the vernacular, I think, now. So, for example, if you have a pair of Dolce & Gabbana shoes and they get a scuff on them and you say to your friend, oh, look, my Dolce & Gabbana's got a scuff on them, your friend might turn and say to you, well, that's a first world problem. In other words, a scuff on a really expensive pair of shoes is not really a problem. Finding food is a problem. So that's what that kind of refers to. Here's the way I would define developed country or developed economy. All three sectors, so that means the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector of the economies are functioning at high levels of efficiency. There's a small percentage of people in the primary sector, but they are very productive. And the farming system uses advanced technology. Most people have expendable income, which means they can afford luxury items. That might be a phone, okay? And the country is generally, usually democratic. Look, about 25% of the world's population consumes 5/6 of the world's products. So things are not spread around equally. I tend to look at this as a continuum where what happens is when you're going from being a developing country to a developed country, it works like this. At first, when you're going from place to place, you walk. Then you ride an animal. Then you ride a bike. Then you ride a moped. Then you're on a motorcycle. Then you buy a car. Then you're in a big SUV. And today, especially in countries like the United States, we're beginning to switch over to hybrid and electric vehicles. So you have everything along that continuum from, say, a Prius down at the bottom to maybe a Tesla up at the top. And even that kind of comes with a certain showiness to it and a little bit of virtue signaling probably. If you drive around in a Tesla, which is a very expensive automobile, are you really trying to save the planet? Or are you telling people that you have a lot of money, you can afford this car? So that's the way this goes. It's a continuum, really. And at the top of that continuum, there may be a lot of things going on. A developing country or a developing economy is this. All three sectors might be at the start, the beginning of functioning efficiently. But countries that are in stage 2 of the demographic transition, they may still have some dysfunction in their economic activity. And there is a decreasing percentage of people in the primary sector, and those people in the primary sector are becoming increasingly productive, and they are beginning to employ advanced technology in agriculture. And there's a growing number of people with expendable income, but not everybody. And those types of countries are usually democratic, or at least moving towards democracy. That's the way I would define a developing country or a developing economy. So let's look at correlation versus causation. Correlation means that things appear to be related. Causation means they are definitely related. I'll give you an example of this. If I walk into your house and I see a guitar, I'm going to make the assumption that you or somebody in the house plays a guitar. It's not just a piece of furniture. But if I see you pick the guitar up and start playing it proficiently, now I know that you actually play the guitar. So the first thing, the assumption, is the correlation, but now that I know that you can play it, that is the causation. I put these things together with evidence. So there's an assumption-based idea set that sort of founds itself on observation, and then there's verification of the assumption and the observation through data analysis. So we have kind of like a best guess estimate and a hypothesis, right? With best guess estimate, we're making a rational assumption based on observation. When we begin to move into hypothesis, now we're sort of proposing an explanation of something based on observation, but it's not really science until we run it through the scientific method, right? And at that point, when we run it through the scientific method, now we have readily observable and repeatable observations based on data and statistics. So what sorts of characteristics and statistics can you think of that would make an academic case, a science-based case, that a particular country is or is not developed or developing? Well, what we're going to look at in the next set of slides and videos is data, particularly on maps. Now, some of this is negative, some of this is positive. That doesn't mean it reflects negatively or positively on the people. It's like something like this: access to healthcare. If you have a lot of access to healthcare, that's positive. If you do not, that's negative. Doesn't reflect on you one way or another necessarily, or on the society necessarily. But that's what we're going to begin to look at in the next set of slides. So the next video. See you there.